Welcome, dear listener, to another quiet journey here at Deep Sleep Stories. I'm Tim, your guide for tonight, and I'm grateful you've chosen to spend this time with me. This evening, we'll wander slowly into a tale that has lived in whispers and pages for centuries. A story of longing, patience, and the mysterious strength that grows in silence. It is the story of Rapunzel. But before we begin, let's pause. Take a moment to settle into comfort, to let your body rest exactly where it is. Notice the gentle rise of your breath and the soft release as you exhale. There is no rush, no expectation, only the quiet unfolding of words, like a lantern glowing in the dark. Now, let us step into the story. In a small town, bordered by fields and forests, there lived a couple who longed for a child. They were kind, gentle people, and though their days were simple, their hearts carried a quiet ache. Their cottage stood near a high wall, behind which lay a garden unlike any other. It belonged to a woman known only in whispers, a woman who kept to herself, and whose presence stirred both curiosity and unease. The garden was filled with herbs and flowers, rare plants that shimmered with color even in the dim light of dusk, and among them grew a plant with long, tender leaves, green as spring rain. The villagers called it Rapunzel. One evening, as the sun lowered and shadows stretched across the cottage, the wife stood at her window. Her eyes wandered to the garden beyond the wall, and there she saw the Rapunzel leaves glistening softly in the fading light. Something stirred within her, a longing so deep it felt like hunger. She turned to her husband, her voice quiet but urgent. "If I cannot taste that plant," she whispered, "I fear I will not endure." The husband, troubled by her words, tried to soothe her, but night after night, her longing grew stronger, and with each passing day, her face grew pale, her spirit restless. At last, he could bear it no longer. He resolved to climb the wall, to bring her what she desired. He waited until the moon rose high, silver light spilling across the stones. Quietly, he lifted himself over the wall, landing softly in the garden. The air was rich with fragrance, lavender, sage, rosemary, but his eyes went straight to the Rapunzel leaves, glowing faintly in the moonlight. He bent down, gathered a handful, and hurried back to the cottage. When his wife tasted the leaves, her face lit with relief. Her strength returned, her spirit calmed, but the craving did not fade. It grew, and soon she begged for more. The husband, though fearful, returned again and again, until one night, as he reached for the leaves, a shadow fell across him. The garden's mistress stood before him, tall, cloaked, her eyes sharp as glass. The garden's mistress stood tall in the moonlight. Her cloak seemed to shimmer with shadows, and her eyes held a sharp, unyielding light. The husband froze, clutching the leaves in his trembling hands. He tried to speak, but his voice faltered. "You dare," she said softly, though her words carried the weight of thunder, "to steal from me." He fell to his knees, pleading. "My wife, she longs for these leaves. Without them, I fear she will fade. I meant no harm." The woman studied him for a long moment. Her gaze did not soften, yet there was something measured in her silence. At last, she spoke. "You may take what you need, but in return, when your child is born, it shall be mine." The husband's breath caught. He wanted to refuse, to cry out, to protect the life not yet begun, but fear bound him. And so, with a heavy heart, he agreed. Months passed. The wife's strength returned, and soon a child was born, a daughter with hair like spun gold, shimmering even in the faintest light. The parents held her close, whispering her name, Rapunzel. But their joy was short-lived. The garden's mistress came, cloaked in silence, and claimed the child. Her hands were firm, her eyes unyielding, and though the parents wept, they could not undo the promise. Rapunzel grew beneath the woman's watchful care. She was not cruel, nor was she kind. She was simply distant. She kept the child hidden, away from the world. And as Rapunzel grew, her hair lengthened, flowing like rivers of sunlight. It was unlike anything seen before, strong, radiant, alive. When Rapunzel reached her 12th year, the woman carried her deep into the forest. There, hidden among the trees, stood a tower. Its walls rose high, smooth and unbroken. No door, no stair, only a single window at the very top. "This will be your home," the woman said, and with that, she placed Rapunzel inside. The tower was quiet. Its stone walls echoed with the sound of her own voice. She sang to herself, soft melodies that drifted out through the window, carried by the wind. The woman came often, bringing food and supplies, but she did not climb the walls. Instead, she called out, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." And Rapunzel, obedient and gentle, would gather her golden locks, twisting them into a long braid and lowering it from the window. The woman would climb, hand over hand, until she reached the room above. Thus, the years passed. Rapunzel grew into a young woman, her hair longer than ever, her voice sweeter than bird song. She gazed out at the forest, watching the seasons turn. Spring blossoms, summer leaves, autumn gold, winter snow. She dreamed of the world beyond, but the tower remained her cage. The forest surrounding the tower was vast and quiet. Birdsong drifted through the branches, and the wind carried whispers across the leaves. Rapunzel often sang at her window, her voice rising like a gentle stream, flowing into the stillness. One afternoon, as the sun lingered low and golden, a prince rode through the forest. He was not searching for anything in particular, only wandering, letting the rhythm of his horse's steps guide him deeper among the trees. And then he heard it, a voice, soft, clear, unlike any sound he had known. It rose above the rustle of branches weaving through the air like light itself. He stopped, listening. The song seemed to come from nowhere, and yet everywhere. He followed it, step by step, until he reached the clearing. There, he saw the tower, tall, unbroken, its single window glowing faintly in the fading light. The prince gazed upward, and from that window, he saw her, Rapunzel, her golden hair spilling like sunlight, her face serene as she sang. He did not call out. He simply stood, listening, until the song faded into silence. Then, quietly, he withdrew, his heart stirred by something he could not name. But he returned. Day after day, he came back to the forest, drawn by the voice that seemed to soothe even the deepest corners of his soul. He watched from the shadows, never daring to approach, until one evening, he saw something unusual. The woman, cloaked, stern, appeared at the base of the tower. She lifted her voice, sharp and commanding. "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." And Rapunzel obeyed. She gathered her golden braid, lowered it from the window, and the woman climbed, hand over hand, until she vanished inside. The prince's eyes widened. So this was the way. The hair was the ladder. He waited until the woman left, her cloak trailing behind her as she disappeared into the forest. Then with a breath of courage, he stepped forward. "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." His voice was gentle, uncertain. But Rapunzel heard. She leaned from the window, surprised yet curious, and slowly she lowered her braid. The prince grasped it, climbing carefully until at last he reached the room above. Rapunzel stared at him, wide-eyed. She had never seen another face, save the woman's, and here stood a stranger, kind-eyed, warm, his presence filling the small stone chamber with something new. For a moment, neither spoke, only silence, heavy with wonder. Then softly, the prince said, "Your song, it led me here." Rapunzel's heart stirred. She had sung into the emptiness for so long, and now someone had answered. Rapunzel's heart raced as she looked at the prince. For so long, her world had been stone walls and silence. Now, here stood someone new, someone who had climbed not out of command, but out of longing. The prince spoke gently, his voice steady yet warm. "I have heard your song many times. It has carried me through the forest, through the quiet of my days. I wished only to see the one who sings so beautifully." Rapunzel lowered her gaze, unsure how to respond. No one had ever spoken to her like this. Her life had been filled with orders, with solitude, and now words of kindness filled the air. She asked softly, "Do you live nearby?" The prince smiled. "My home lies beyond the forest, a place of gardens, halls, and light, but none of it feels as alive as your voice." Rapunzel felt a warmth rise within her, unfamiliar yet comforting. She had dreamed of the world beyond the tower, imagined faces she would never see, and now one of those faces stood before her. They spoke for hours. The prince told her of rivers that shimmered beneath the sun, of markets filled with laughter, of paths that stretched endlessly across the land. Rapunzel listened, her eyes wide, her heart aching with wonder. She shared her own small world, the songs she sang, the seasons she watched from her window, the silence that had shaped her days. The prince listened with care, as though each word mattered. When the sky grew dark, he knew he must leave, but he promised to return, and Rapunzel, for the first time, felt hope bloom within her. The days that followed were filled with anticipation. Each morning, she gazed out, waiting for the sound of footsteps below, and each evening he came. "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair." His voice was gentle, never commanding, and each time he climbed, her heart lifted. Together they spoke, they laughed, they dreamed. The tower no longer felt so heavy, so endless. It became a place of secret joy. One evening, as the stars shimmered above, the prince whispered, "Rapunzel, would you come with me? Would you leave this tower and see the world beyond?" Rapunzel's breath caught. The thought was both thrilling and frightening. She had never stepped beyond the walls, but her heart longed for freedom, for life, for love. She nodded softly. "Yes, but how?" The prince's eyes glowed with determination. "We will find a way." Rapunzel's heart fluttered with the prince's words. To leave the tower, to step into the world she had only imagined. It felt like a dream too fragile to touch. Yet the prince's eyes held a promise, steady, unwavering, and she found herself whispering, "Yes, I want to see it. I want to live beyond these walls." The prince reached for her hand, gently, as though it were the most precious thing he had ever held. "Then we will find a way," he said. They began to plan. Each evening, when the forest grew quiet and the stars shimmered above, they spoke of escape. The prince described paths through the woods, villages beyond, and the safety of his home. Rapunzel listened, her heart filling with hope. But the tower was high, its walls unbroken. Only her hair served as a ladder, and though strong, it could not carry both of them down together. So they thought carefully. The prince suggested, if you could weave a rope, strand by strand, we might climb down without her knowing. Rapunzel's eyes lit with possibility. She had thread, she had skill, and though the task would take time, she was patient. Night after night, she began to work. She braided small lengths of silk and yarn, weaving them together with quiet determination. Her fingers moved steadily, each knot a step toward freedom. The prince brought her more materials, scraps of cloth, strands of linen, hidden beneath his cloak. Together, they built the rope, piece by piece, and as they worked, their bond deepened. Rapunzel shared her dreams of walking barefoot in grass, of touching the bark of trees, of feeling rain upon her skin. The prince listened, promising that each dream would one day be real. But the woman, sharp-eyed and watchful, sensed change. She noticed Rapunzel's songs carried a new brightness. She noticed her gaze lingered longer at the window, and though Rapunzel tried to hide her joy, the woman's suspicion grew. One evening, as she climbed the golden braid, she studied Rapunzel closely. "You seem different," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes narrowed. Rapunzel lowered her gaze, her heart pounding. She whispered, "I only sing to pass the time." The woman said nothing more, but in her silence, Rapunzel felt the weight of danger. The woman's suspicion grew like a shadow. Though Rapunzel tried to hide her joy, her songs carried a brightness that could not be disguised. Her eyes lingered at the window. Her voice softened when she spoke, and the woman, sharp and watchful, noticed every change. One evening, as she climbed the golden braid, she studied Rapunzel closely. "You seem different," she said, her tone quiet but edged with steel. Rapunzel's heart raced. She lowered her gaze, whispering, "I only sing to pass the time." The woman said nothing more, but her silence was heavy, filled with suspicion. Days passed. Rapunzel continued her secret work, weaving the rope strand by strand. Her fingers moved quickly, her heart steady with hope. Each knot was a promise, each braid a step closer to freedom. The prince came often, bringing scraps of cloth, speaking softly of the world beyond. He told her of rivers that shimmered beneath the sun, of fields that stretched endlessly, of skies so wide they seemed to hold eternity. Rapunzel listened, her heart aching with longing. But the woman's presence grew heavier. She came more often, her eyes sharper, her words colder. Rapunzel felt the weight of danger pressing closer. One evening, as the woman climbed, Rapunzel spoke without thinking. Her voice was soft, almost dreamy. "You are much heavier than the prince when he climbs." The words slipped out before she realized their meaning. Her breath caught, her eyes widened, but it was too late. The woman froze, her gaze piercing. "The prince," she whispered, her voice trembling with fury. Rapunzel's silence was answer enough. The woman's anger rose like a storm. She seized Rapunzel's golden hair, her hands trembling with rage. With a sharp blade, she cut it away, strand after strand, until the golden river lay in her hands. Rapunzel's head felt light, empty, bare, her heart shattered. The rope of sunlight that had been her ladder, her freedom, her identity, was gone. The woman did not stop there. She carried Rapunzel deep into the wilderness, far from the tower, far from the prince. There, she left her alone, surrounded by silence and trees. Back at the tower, the woman waited. She tied Rapunzel's severed braid to the window, letting it hang like a trap. And when the prince returned, calling softly, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair," she smiled coldly. The braid lowered, the prince climbed, and at the top he found not Rapunzel, but the woman. The prince climbed swiftly, his heart light with anticipation. He had imagined Rapunzel's smile, her golden hair, the warmth of her voice waiting for him at the top. But when he reached the window, it was not Rapunzel who stood there. It was the woman. Her eyes burned with fury, her cloak heavy with shadows. She stepped forward, her voice sharp as a blade. "So, you are the one who has stolen her heart." The prince froze, his breath caught in his chest. He tried to speak, but the woman's anger drowned his words. "She is gone," she hissed, "banished to a place where you will never find her, and you shall pay for your trespass." Before the prince could move, she raised her hands. A storm seemed to gather in her eyes, a force that pressed against him like a wave. The tower spun, the world tilted, and he stumbled backward. He fell from the window, tumbling through the air. Branches tore at him, thorns scraped his skin, and when he struck the ground, pain seared through him. His eyes opened, but the world was dark. The thorns had blinded him. He reached out, but saw nothing, only shadows, endless and heavy. The woman watched from above, her face cold. Then she vanished into the forest, leaving the prince broken and alone. He lay there, his heart aching not only from pain, but from loss. Rapunzel was gone, her voice, her laughter, her dreams, all torn away. Yet even in darkness, he whispered her name, Rapunzel. And though he could not see, he rose slowly, step by step, wandering into the forest, guided only by memory and hope. Meanwhile, Rapunzel wandered the wilderness. Her hair, once golden and flowing, now cut short, felt strange against her shoulders. She was alone, surrounded by trees and silence. But within her heart, a spark remained. She remembered the prince's voice, his kindness, his promise. And though the world felt vast and empty, she carried that memory like a lantern in the dark. Rapunzel wandered through the wilderness, her steps uncertain yet steady. The forest stretched endlessly, filled with shadows and whispers. Her hair, once a golden river, now cut short, brushed lightly against her shoulders. It felt strange, unfamiliar, as though a part of her had been taken away. Yet within her heart, a spark remained. She remembered the prince's kindness, his promise, his voice. And though the world felt vast and empty, she carried that memory like a lantern in the dark. The days were difficult. She had never cooked, never gathered food, never built shelter. Her life had been stone walls and silence. Now the wilderness demanded strength she had never known. At first, she stumbled. She tried to weave branches into shelter, but they fell apart. She searched for berries, unsure which were safe. She drank from streams, her reflection staring back at her with quiet determination. But slowly, she learned. She watched the animals, how birds built nests, how deer found water, how foxes moved silently through the brush. She listened to the rhythm of the forest, its quiet lessons hidden in rustling leaves and flowing rivers. Rapunzel began to gather roots and herbs, learning which soothed hunger and which gave strength. She wove grasses into mats, branches into walls. Her hands grew calloused, her spirit resilient. And though loneliness pressed against her, she sang. Her voice rose into the trees, soft and steady, carrying her sorrow and her hope. The forest listened, and in its silence she found comfort. Seasons turned. Spring brought blossoms, summer brought warmth, autumn painted the leaves gold. Winter wrapped the world in snow. Rapunzel endured them all. Her hair grew again, long and strong, shimmering even in the dim light of dusk. It was no longer a ladder for captivity. It was a symbol of survival, of resilience, of quiet strength. Far away, the prince wandered too. Blinded, he moved through the forest, guided only by memory and hope. He stumbled, he fell, yet he rose again, and though darkness surrounded him, he whispered her name. Rapunzel. His voice carried through the trees, faint but steady, and somewhere, though he did not know it, Rapunzel's song answered. The wilderness stretched endlessly, yet fate began to weave its quiet threads. Rapunzel, her voice soft and steady, sang into the trees. Her song carried sorrow, but also hope, a melody that rose like light through the branches. Far away, the prince wandered. Blinded, his steps uncertain, he moved through the forest, guided only by memory and longing. Each day, he whispered her name. Rapunzel. His voice trembled, but it did not fade. And though he could not see, the forest carried his words. They drifted through the air, mingling with Rapunzel's song. Two voices, separated by distance, yet slowly drawing closer. Rapunzel built her life among the trees. She gathered herbs, tended a small patch of earth, and learned to live with the rhythm of the seasons. Her hands grew strong, her spirit resilient. Yet each evening she sang, not only to soothe herself, but to send her voice outward into the vastness. The prince, hearing faint echoes of her song, felt his heart stir. Though he could not see, he followed the sound, step by step, through thorns and shadows. Her voice became his guide, his lantern in the dark. Days turned into weeks. Rapunzel's song grew stronger, carried by the wind. The prince's footsteps grew steadier, his heart filled with determination. And though neither knew it, they were moving toward one another. One evening, as the sun lowered and the forest glowed with golden light, Rapunzel sang at the edge of a stream. Her voice rose clear and gentle, drifting across the water. The prince, weary and blind, stumbled near. He paused, listening. The song was close, closer than ever before. His heart raced. He whispered, Rapunzel. And for the first time, she heard his voice answer her song. Rapunzel's song drifted across the stream, soft and steady, carrying her longing into the twilight. The prince, weary and blind, paused as the melody reached him. His heart raced. The sound was close, closer than ever before. He whispered her name, his voice trembling, yet filled with hope. Rapunzel. Rapunzel froze. Her breath caught, her eyes widened. She had sunk into emptiness for so long, never expecting an answer. But now, she heard his voice. She rose quickly, stepping to the edge of the stream. Her eyes searched the shadows, and there he was, the prince, stumbling forward, his hands reaching, his face marked by sorrow and pain. Rapunzel, he whispered again, and she ran to him. Their hands met, trembling, holding tightly as though they would never let go. Rapunzel's tears fell, shining in the fading light. You found me, she said softly. Her voice carried both wonder and grief. The prince, though blind, smiled faintly. I followed your song. It was the only light I had. Rapunzel held him close, her heart aching at his wounds, his blindness, his suffering. Yet beneath the sorrow, joy bloomed. They were together again. She guided him to her small shelter, offering water, herbs, and comfort. Her hands moved gently, tending his injuries, soothing his pain. And as she wept, her tears fell upon his eyes. The forest grew quiet, as though listening, and slowly, the prince opened his eyes. Light returned. He blinked, uncertain, but then he saw her, Rapunzel, radiant, her hair shimmering once more, her face filled with love. The prince's vision cleared, and joy filled his heart. He gazed at her, whispering, "You are more beautiful than any dream." Rapunzel smiled, her tears shining. Together they embraced, their sorrow melting into hope. The wilderness no longer felt empty. It was the place where they had found each other again. And from that moment, they knew they would never be parted. Rapunzel and the prince remained together in the wilderness for many days. The forest, once a place of sorrow, became a sanctuary of healing. They shared food, built fires, and spoke softly beneath the stars. Each moment carried the quiet joy of reunion, the relief of love found again. But the prince knew they could not stay forever. His kingdom awaited, and he longed to bring Rapunzel into the world she had dreamed of. He spoke gently. "Rapunzel, will you come with me? My home is filled with gardens, halls, and light. It is a place where you will be free." Rapunzel's heart stirred. She had lived in silence, in captivity, in wilderness. Now, the thought of walking openly, of living without fear, filled her with wonder. She nodded softly. "Yes, I will go with you." Their journey began slowly. The prince, though his sight had returned, still carried the weight of his wounds. Rapunzel guided him, her hands steady, her spirit strong. Together, they moved through forests, across streams, and over hills. The world unfolded before Rapunzel's eyes. She touched the bark of trees, felt grass beneath her feet, tasted fruit fresh from the vine. Each step was a discovery, each breath a gift. The prince watched her with quiet joy. Her wonder reminded him of the beauty he had long taken for granted, and he vowed to protect her, to cherish her, to ensure she would never be caged again. At last, they reached the edge of the forest. Beyond lay the prince's kingdom, towers rising in the distance, fields shimmering in the sun. Rapunzel's eyes widened, her heart racing. It was more than she had imagined. The people welcomed them with warmth. They had heard of the prince's sorrow, his blindness, his wandering. Now they saw him return with Rapunzel at his side, radiant and strong. Together, they entered the palace. Its halls glowed with light, its gardens bloomed with color. Rapunzel felt as though she had stepped into a dream. The prince turned to her, his voice soft but steady. "This is your home now. No tower, no chains, no shadows. Only freedom, only love." Rapunzel smiled, her golden hair shimmering in the light. And for the first time, she felt truly free. Rapunzel's new life in the kingdom began gently, like dawn breaking after a long night. The palace was filled with light, its halls echoing with laughter and conversation. For Rapunzel, every detail felt wondrous. The sound of footsteps on marble floors, the fragrance of flowers blooming in the gardens, the warmth of sunlight streaming through wide windows. She walked through the gardens slowly, touching each leaf, marveling at the colors. She had known only stone walls and wilderness. Now the world unfolded in endless variety. The people welcomed her with kindness. They had heard whispers of her story, the tower, the golden hair, the prince's sorrow, and when they saw her, radiant and gentle, they felt a quiet respect. Rapunzel, once hidden, now stood among them, free. The prince guided her through the palace, showing her rooms filled with books, halls filled with music, courtyards alive with fountains. Rapunzel listened, her eyes wide, her heart filled with wonder. She had dreamed of freedom, and now each day brought new discoveries. She learned to walk among the people, to speak with them, to share her songs. Her voice, once confined to a tower, now filled the kingdom with peace. Children gathered to hear her melodies. Elders smiled at her gentleness, and the palace itself seemed brighter with her presence. Yet Rapunzel carried her past within her. She remembered the silence of the tower, the loneliness of the wilderness, the pain of loss. But those memories did not weigh her down. They gave her strength. She knew what it meant to endure, to hope, to rise again. The prince saw this strength and admired it deeply. He knew she was not only beautiful, but resilient, wise, and kind. Together, they built a bond rooted not only in love, but in shared trials. As the days turned into weeks, Rapunzel began to feel truly at home. The palace was no longer overwhelming. It was a place of belonging, of joy, of freedom. And each evening, as the sun lowered and the stars appeared, she sang. Her voice drifted through the gardens, soft and steady, carrying peace to all who listened. It was no longer a song of longing. It was a song of gratitude, of love, of life renewed. The kingdom soon began to celebrate the bond between Rapunzel and the prince. Word spread quickly of the girl once hidden in a tower, now free, radiant, and strong. The people admired her resilience, her gentleness, and the way her presence seemed to bring peace wherever she walked. Festivals were held in the courtyards, lanterns glowing against the night sky. Musicians played soft melodies, and children danced in circles, their laughter echoing through the halls. Rapunzel watched with wide eyes, her heart filled with wonder. She had known silence, solitude, and sorrow. Now she stood among joy, surrounded by light. The prince remained close to her side. He guided her through the celebrations, introducing her to nobles and villagers alike. Each person greeted her warmly, bowing with respect, smiling with kindness. Rapunzel, though shy, returned their greetings with gentle words and a quiet smile. Her voice, once confined to stone walls, now filled the kingdom. She sang during the festivals, her melodies drifting through the air like blessings. The people listened, their hearts calmed, their spirits lifted. Her songs became a gift to the kingdom, a reminder of hope, resilience, and love. The bond between Rapunzel and the prince deepened. They spoke often of their journey, of the tower, the wilderness, the pain they had endured. But they also dreamed of the future, of gardens they would walk together, of halls filled with laughter, of days lived in freedom. The prince admired her strength, her patience, her kindness. Rapunzel admired his courage, his loyalty, his unwavering love. Together, they built a bond rooted not only in joy, but in the trials they had overcome. One evening, as lanterns glowed across the palace gardens, the prince took Rapunzel's hand. His voice was soft, steady, filled with devotion. Rapunzel, you have brought light into my life. Will you remain with me, not only as my love, but as my queen? Rapunzel's eyes filled with tears. She had once been hidden, forgotten, alone. Now she was cherished, honored, free. She whispered, yes, and the kingdom rejoiced. Preparations for Rapunzel and the prince's union began with gentle anticipation. The palace filled with quiet excitement. Servants arranging flowers, musicians rehearsing soft melodies, artisans crafting garments of silk and gold. Every detail was touched with care, as though the kingdom itself wished to honor the journey that had brought them here. Rapunzel watched with wonder. She had once known only stone walls and silence. Now she walked through halls alive with color, gardens blooming with fragrance, and people smiling warmly at her. It felt like stepping into a dream. The queen's seamstresses came to her, bringing fabrics that shimmered like sunlight. They measured, stitched, and wove, creating a gown that reflected her spirit. Simple, yet radiant, flowing like her golden hair. Rapunzel touched the fabric gently, marveling at its softness. She had worn only plain dresses before. Now she would wear something crafted with love and honor. The prince, too, prepared. He spoke with his advisors, ensuring that the celebration would welcome not only nobles, but villagers, children, and elders. He wanted the union to be a gift to the entire kingdom, a moment of shared joy. Rapunzel spent her days learning the ways of the palace. She listened to the people, spoke with kindness, and offered her songs. Her voice drifted through the halls, calming hearts, lifting spirits. The people began to see her not only as the prince's love, but as their future queen. At night, she and the prince walked together in the gardens. They spoke of their journey, of the tower, the wilderness, the pain they had endured. But they also dreamed of the future, of peace, of laughter, of days filled with freedom. The kingdom awaited the day of their union with joy. Lanterns were prepared, flowers gathered, music composed. Every heart seemed to beat with anticipation. And Rapunzel, once hidden, once forgotten, now stood at the center of it all. Her spirit, resilient and gentle, had carried her through sorrow. Now it shone with love, ready to embrace the life she had long dreamed of. The day of their union arrived with gentle splendor. The palace was adorned with flowers, their fragrance drifting softly through the halls. Lanterns hung from every archway, glowing like stars even in daylight. The kingdom gathered, nobles in fine garments, villagers in simple attire, children clutching blossoms in their hands. All hearts beat with anticipation. All eyes turned toward Rapunzel and the prince. Rapunzel stood in her gown of flowing silk, her golden hair shimmering like sunlight. She felt both nervous and serene, her heart steady with love. She had once been hidden, forgotten, alone. Now she stood before the world, cherished and free. The prince, dressed in garments of deep blue and silver, looked at her with quiet devotion. His eyes held no doubt, only love. He reached for her hand, and together they walked into the courtyard where the people waited. The ceremony was simple, yet profound. Words of promise were spoken, vows exchanged. The prince pledged his loyalty, his love, his protection. Rapunzel pledged her kindness, her resilience, her devotion. As they spoke, the people listened in silence, their hearts moved by the story that had brought them here. The girl once locked in a tower, the prince once blinded by sorrow, now united, stronger than ever. When the vows were complete, the kingdom erupted in joy. Music filled the air, children scattered petals, and laughter echoed through the palace. Rapunzel and the prince embraced, their love shining brighter than any lantern. The celebration lasted long into the night. Tables were filled with food, musicians played, dancers moved gracefully across the courtyards. Rapunzel sang, her voice carrying peace and joy to all who listened. Her song was no longer one of longing. It was a song of fulfillment, of love, of freedom. The prince stood beside her, his heart filled with gratitude. Together, they looked out at the kingdom, their people, their home, and they knew that this was only the beginning. Rapunzel's life as queen began with quiet grace. The palace, once overwhelming, now felt like home. She walked through its halls with calm confidence, her presence bringing peace to those around her. The people admired her not only for her beauty, but for her kindness, her resilience, and the gentle wisdom she carried from her years of solitude. She listened to the voices of the kingdom. Villagers came to her with concerns, children with laughter, elders with stories. Rapunzel welcomed them all, her heart open, her words soft yet steady. She had once been hidden, silenced. Now she was a voice of comfort, a presence of light. The prince stood beside her, guiding her through the duties of the crown. Together, they made decisions with care, ensuring that the kingdom thrived not only in wealth, but in harmony. Rapunzel's perspective was unique, shaped by hardship, by patience, by survival. She understood the value of small things: bread on the table, warmth in the home, kindness in the heart. Her songs became part of the kingdom's rhythm. She sang in the courtyards, her voice drifting through the air like a blessing. Farmers paused in their work to listen. Children gathered with wide eyes, and even the weary found peace in her melodies. Her voice, once confined to a tower, now belonged to the world. Rapunzel also tended the palace gardens. She planted herbs, flowers, and vegetables, coaxing life from the soil with patient hands. The people marveled at their queen kneeling in the earth, her golden hair shimmering in the sun. She reminded them that strength was not only in power, but in care, in gentleness, in resilience. The prince admired her deeply. He saw how she transformed sorrow into wisdom, solitude into compassion, and he knew that with her by his side, the kingdom would flourish. Rapunzel's days were filled with joy, but also with purpose. She had endured silence, loneliness, and loss. Now she used those memories to guide her people, to remind them of hope, to show them that even in darkness, light can be found. And each evening, as the stars appeared, she sang. Her voice carried across the kingdom, soft and steady, a reminder that love and resilience can transform even the deepest sorrow into peace. Rapunzel and the prince began to shape the kingdom together, weaving kindness and wisdom into its future. Their union was not only celebrated in the palace, but felt in the villages, the farms, and the marketplaces. The people saw in them a promise that leadership could be gentle, that power could be guided by compassion. Rapunzel listened carefully to the voices of the people. She visited the villages, walked among the fields, and spoke with those who worked the land. Her words were simple, her presence humble, yet her kindness left a lasting mark. She reminded them that their queen was not distant, but near, sharing in their lives. The prince admired her deeply. He had known the duties of rule, the weight of decisions, the burden of responsibility. But Rapunzel brought something new: patience, empathy, and a quiet strength that softened even the hardest tasks. Together, they balanced one another. His courage and vision, her gentleness and resilience, became the foundation of their reign. Under their guidance, the kingdom flourished. Markets grew lively, gardens bloomed, and peace spread across the land. Rapunzel's songs became part of the kingdom's rhythm, sung at festivals, whispered in homes, carried by children in play. Her voice, once confined to a tower, now belonged to all. The people began to call her not only queen, but the golden heart of the kingdom. For she had endured sorrow, and from it she had built compassion. Her story became a reminder that even in darkness, light can be found. Each evening, Rapunzel and the prince walked together in the palace gardens. They spoke of the past, of the tower and the wilderness, but also of the future, of children, of peace, of a kingdom built on love. The stars shimmered above, and their voices carried softly through the night. And so, the kingdom thrived, not through fear, not through power alone, but through kindness, resilience, and love. Rapunzel and the prince began to dream of family. Their days in the palace were filled with joy, yet their hearts longed for something more, a legacy, a continuation of their love. In quiet moments, they spoke of children. Rapunzel imagined little hands reaching for hers, laughter echoing through the gardens, voices joining hers in song. The prince imagined teaching them courage, guiding them with wisdom, showing them the beauty of the world beyond the palace walls. The kingdom, too, shared in their anticipation. The people whispered with hope, imagining the future heirs who would carry forward the gentleness and strength of their queen, the courage and devotion of their king. They saw in Rapunzel and the prince not only rulers, but parents, nurturing, guiding, protecting. Rapunzel prepared herself with patience. She tended the gardens, weaving lessons of resilience into her daily life. She spoke with mothers in the villages, listening to their wisdom, learning from their experiences. Her heart grew ready, steady, filled with quiet strength. The prince often walked with her beneath the stars. He spoke of legacy, of the importance of raising children, not only with privilege, but with kindness. Rapunzel agreed. She knew that love was the greatest gift, and she vowed that their children would grow surrounded by it. Together, they dreamed of a future filled with laughter, of halls echoing with footsteps, of gardens alive with play. Their love, once tested by sorrow, now prepared to blossom into new beginnings. And so, the story of Rapunzel and the prince turned toward legacy, not only a tale of survival and reunion, but of growth, of family, of love, carried forward into generations yet to come. Rapunzel's dreams of motherhood began to take shape. The palace, once quiet, now seemed to hum with anticipation. Servants whispered with joy. Villagers brought gifts of woven blankets and carved toys, and the kingdom prepared to welcome new life. Rapunzel herself felt a gentle change within. Her heart grew softer, her spirit steadier. She spent long hours in the gardens, tending the earth with patient hands, imagining little footsteps running among the flowers. Her songs carried a new warmth, lullabies woven with hope, melodies filled with tenderness. The prince shared her joy. He spoke often of the future, of teaching their children courage and kindness, of showing them the beauty of the world beyond the palace walls. He dreamed of guiding them through forests, of telling them stories beneath the stars, of raising them not only as heirs, but as souls filled with love. Together, they prepared quietly. Rapunzel gathered wisdom from mothers in the villages, listening to their gentle advice. She learned of patience, of care, of the strength required to nurture life. The prince ensured the palace was ready, safe, welcoming, filled with light. The kingdom rejoiced. Festivals were held, lanterns lit, songs sung in honor of the new chapter unfolding. The people saw in Rapunzel and the prince not only rulers, but parents, guardians of love, builders of legacy. And as the days passed, Rapunzel felt her dreams drawing closer. She had once been hidden, forgotten, alone. Now she was cherished, honored, and ready to bring new life into the world. Her story, once of sorrow, now turned toward beginnings, a legacy of resilience, of kindness, of love carried forward into generations yet to come. The day of new life arrived with quiet wonder. Rapunzel, once hidden in a tower, now stood in the palace as a mother. Her heart overflowed as she held her child, small and fragile, yet radiant with promise. The prince stood beside her, his eyes filled with joy and gratitude. Together they gazed upon the child, a symbol of love, resilience, and hope carried forward. The kingdom rejoiced. Bells rang across the land, villagers gathered in celebration, and songs filled the air. Children danced in circles, elders blessed the newborn, and the people felt their future secure. They saw in the child not only an heir, but a continuation of Rapunzel's story, a legacy of kindness, of strength, of freedom. Rapunzel sang softly, her voice weaving lullabies that carried peace through the palace. Her song, once filled with longing, now cradled new beginnings. The prince listened, his heart steady, knowing that their love had blossomed into something greater than themselves. Days unfolded gently. Rapunzel tended her child with patience, guiding each moment with tenderness. The prince offered his strength, his protection, his devotion. Together, they built a family rooted in love. The palace, once echoing with silence, now rang with laughter and tiny footsteps. The gardens bloomed brighter, the halls felt warmer, the kingdom itself seemed alive with joy. Rapunzel's journey had carried her from sorrow to freedom, from solitude to love, from captivity to motherhood. Her story was no longer only her own. It was now woven into the lives of her child, her people, her kingdom. And each evening, as the stars appeared, she sang. Her voice carried across the land, soft and steady, a reminder that love endures, that resilience blossoms, that hope is never lost. Rapunzel's child began to grow, each day unfolding like a new chapter. The palace, once echoing with silence, now rang with laughter, footsteps, and curious voices. Rapunzel watched with tender joy as her child explored the gardens, touched the flowers, and listened to her songs with wide, wondering eyes. She taught gently, weaving lessons into everyday moments. From the earth, she taught resilience, how seeds grow slowly, yet surely, into blossoms. From the stars, she taught hope, how light shines even in the darkest night. From her own story, she taught kindness, that love and forgiveness are stronger than fear. The prince guided their child with equal devotion. He spoke of courage, of loyalty, of the strength found in honesty. He told stories of journeys through forests, of battles with sorrow, of the power of perseverance. Together, Rapunzel and the prince shaped their child's heart with wisdom and love. The people of the kingdom adored the little one. They saw in the child a continuation of Rapunzel's golden spirit and the prince's steadfast courage. Festivals often echoed with laughter as the child joined in dances, listened to songs, and became part of the kingdom's joy. Rapunzel felt her life complete. She had once been hidden, forgotten, alone. Now she was a mother, a queen, a guide. Her story had become a legacy, not only for her child, but for all who listened to her songs. And each evening, as the stars appeared, she sang. Her child listened, eyes wide, heart calm. Her voice carried across the kingdom, soft and steady, a reminder that love endures, wisdom grows, and hope is never lost. Rapunzel's child began to discover their own gifts. From the earliest days, the palace echoed not only with laughter, but with curiosity. Questions asked, songs hummed, footsteps chasing through the gardens. Rapunzel watched with tender pride, seeing reflections of her own resilience and the prince's courage in their child's spirit. The child loved the gardens most of all. They touched the flowers gently, listened to the rustle of leaves, and seemed to understand the quiet language of the earth. Rapunzel taught them patience, how seeds must rest before they bloom, how growth takes time, how even the smallest sprout carries promise. The prince guided them in other ways. He spoke of honesty, of loyalty, of the strength found in standing firm. He told stories of journeys through forests, of battles with sorrow, of the courage needed to walk through darkness with hope. The child listened, wide-eyed, absorbing each lesson like sunlight. Together, Rapunzel and the prince passed on their wisdom, hers woven with gentleness, his shaped by devotion. The child grew not only in body, but in spirit, carrying forward the legacy of love and resilience. The kingdom rejoiced in the child's presence. Villagers welcomed them with laughter. Elders offered blessings. Children played together in the courtyards. The people saw in the child a future filled with promise, a continuation of Rapunzel's golden heart and the prince's steadfast courage. And each evening, as the stars appeared, Rapunzel sang. Her child joined softly, their voice uncertain but bright. Together, their song carried across the kingdom, a harmony of past and future, of wisdom passed gently from one generation to the next. Rapunzel's child began to step into the wider world. The palace gardens, once their playground, now became a place of learning and reflection. They wandered further, curious about the villages, the forests, the lives beyond the palace walls. Rapunzel watched with tender pride, her heart both joyful and cautious. She knew that growth meant independence, that wisdom must be lived, not only taught. The prince encouraged exploration. He guided their child through the kingdom, showing them the bustling markets, the quiet farms, the strength of the people. He spoke of responsibility, that leadership was not about command, but about care. The child listened, absorbing each lesson, their spirit growing stronger with each step. Rapunzel offered gentler guidance. She reminded them of patience, of kindness, of the quiet strength found in forgiveness. Her songs became lessons, her stories became lanterns, lighting the path ahead. She did not hold them back, but she watched closely, her love steady, her presence always near. The people welcomed the child warmly. They saw in them a reflection of Rapunzel's golden heart and the prince's steadfast courage. Children played together in the courtyards. Elders offered blessings, and villagers spoke with hope of the future. The kingdom felt alive with promise, its legacy secure. Rapunzel and the prince stood together, watching from afar. They did not interfere, but they guided gently, offering wisdom when asked, comfort when needed. They knew that their child's journey must be their own, shaped by choices, strengthened by trials, illuminated by love. And each evening, as the stars appeared, Rapunzel sang. Her child listened, sometimes joining, sometimes simply resting in the sound. Her voice carried across the kingdom, a reminder that even as independence grows, love remains steady and eternal. Rapunzel's child soon faced their first true challenge. It came not in the safety of the palace, but in the wider world beyond its walls. A storm swept across the kingdom, fierce and unrelenting. Fields flooded, homes trembled, and the people grew fearful. The child, still young, but filled with courage, wished to help. They remembered Rapunzel's lessons of patience, of kindness, of resilience. They remembered the prince's teachings of loyalty, of honesty, of strength. And so, they stepped forward, determined to bring comfort to those in need. Rapunzel watched with both pride and worry. Her heart longed to protect, yet she knew that growth required facing trials. She sang softly, her voice carrying through the storm, guiding her child with calm strength. The prince stood steady, offering wisdom, reminding their child that true courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to act despite it. Together, the family moved through the kingdom. Rapunzel's child helped villagers gather food, offered hands to rebuild, and spoke words of hope. Though small, their presence brought light. The people saw in them the promise of a future leader, one shaped by love, resilience, and compassion. When the storm passed, the kingdom stood stronger. Fields were restored, homes rebuilt, spirits lifted. Rapunzel's child had faced their first challenge, and though the trial was heavy, they had endured. Rapunzel embraced them, whispering softly, "You carry within you the strength of our story. Never forget, kindness is your greatest power." The prince added with quiet pride, "And courage will always guide you." And so, the child's journey began, not only as heir, but as a soul shaped by trials, guided by wisdom, and strengthened by love. The legacy of Rapunzel and the prince lived on, carried forward into the next generation. Rapunzel's child began to grow into their role as a leader. The kingdom, once guided solely by Rapunzel and the prince, now saw the first signs of a new era shaped by youthful presence. The child walked among the people with openness, listening carefully, speaking gently, offering help where it was needed. Their kindness reflected Rapunzel's heart. Their courage echoed the prince's strength. The villagers admired them. They saw in the child not only an heir, but a companion, someone who understood their struggles, who shared their joys, who carried their hopes. Children played alongside them, elders offered blessings, and the people began to trust that the future would be safe in their hands. Rapunzel watched with quiet pride. She remembered her own journey, from captivity to freedom, from sorrow to love. Now she saw her child carrying that legacy forward, shaping it into something new. Her songs became softer, filled with gratitude, guiding her child with melodies of wisdom. The prince stood steady, offering counsel when needed, but allowing independence to grow. He knew that leadership must be learned through experience, through trials, through choices made with courage. The kingdom began to feel the shift. Festivals carried new energy, markets thrived with fresh ideas, and the people spoke of renewal. Rapunzel's child was not yet ruler, but their presence already shaped the land. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one where legacy became living guidance, and the future unfolded with promise. And each evening, as the stars appeared, Rapunzel sang. Her child listened, sometimes joining, sometimes simply resting in the sound. Her voice carried across the kingdom, a reminder that love endures, wisdom grows, and hope is passed gently from one generation to the next. Rapunzel's child soon faced a test of leadership. It was not a storm this time, but a choice, one that would shape both their path and the trust of the people. A dispute arose in the villages. Two groups, both hardworking, both loyal, found themselves divided over land and harvest. Voices grew tense, hearts heavy, and the kingdom looked to the royal family for guidance. The prince advised caution, reminding his child that justice must be fair, steady, and clear. Rapunzel offered gentleness, reminding them that kindness must guide every word. But the decision itself, the balance between fairness and compassion, rested with the child. They listened carefully to both sides. They walked the fields, spoke with the farmers, touched the soil, and saw the struggle firsthand. Then, with a steady voice, they offered a solution, one that shared resources, honored both groups, and reminded the people that unity was stronger than division. The villagers accepted with gratitude. They saw in the child not only wisdom, but empathy. The dispute dissolved, replaced with cooperation, and the kingdom grew stronger. Rapunzel watched with quiet pride. Her child had chosen not only with reason, but with heart. The prince stood tall, his eyes filled with respect. Together, they knew that the legacy of love and resilience was alive in the next generation. And each evening, as the stars appeared, Rapunzel sang. Her child listened, their voice now stronger, joining in harmony. The song carried across the kingdom, a reminder that leadership is not power alone, but the weaving of courage and kindness into every choice. Rapunzel's child began to take on greater responsibilities. The kingdom, once guided solely by Rapunzel and the prince, now slowly opened its arms to the presence of the next generation. The child attended councils, listened to advisors, and spoke with villagers, learning the rhythm of leadership step by step. Rapunzel watched with gentle pride. She remembered her own journey, how patience and resilience had carried her through sorrow. Now she saw those same qualities blossoming in her child, shaping them into someone who could guide with both wisdom and compassion. The prince offered steady counsel. He taught the importance of balance, that decisions must honor both justice and kindness, that strength must be tempered with humility. He allowed his child to make choices, even small ones, so that confidence could grow naturally. Rapunzel's songs became softer, filled with guidance. Her melodies carried lessons of forgiveness, of hope, of the quiet strength found in gentleness. Her child listened, their spirit shaped by the harmony of words and music. The people began to notice the change. They saw the child not only as heir, but as a leader in the making. Markets thrived with new ideas, villages felt heard, and the kingdom grew more united. It was the beginning of a new era, one where legacy became living presence and the future unfolded with promise. And each evening as the stars appeared, Rapunzel sang. Her child joined, their voice stronger now, weaving harmony with hers. Together, their song carried across the kingdom, a reminder that leadership is not inherited alone, but nurtured through love, resilience, and wisdom. Rapunzel's child, though growing into their role, soon faced a moment of doubt. Leadership, though filled with promise, carried weight. One evening, after a long day of listening to disputes and guiding decisions, they sat quietly in the palace gardens, their heart heavy. "Am I truly ready?" they whispered. The stars shimmered above, but their spirit felt uncertain. They worried that their choices might falter, that their strength might not be enough, that the people's trust was too great a burden. Rapunzel found them there, seated among the flowers. She knelt beside her child, her voice soft, her presence steady. "You carry within you the lessons of our story," she said. "Strength is not the absence of doubt, but the courage to continue even when doubt whispers." The prince joined them, his hand resting gently on his child's shoulder. "Every leader feels the weight," he said, "but you are not alone. We stand with you, and the people stand with you. Trust in kindness, trust in courage, and trust in yourself." The child listened, their hearts slowly calming. Rapunzel sang softly, her voice weaving reassurance into the night. The prince's words carried steadiness, grounding them in love. Together, their guidance reminded the child that leadership was not about perfection, but about resilience, compassion, and the willingness to learn. And so, the doubt began to fade. The child rose, their spirit steadier, their heart renewed. They knew that trials would come, that uncertainty would return, but they also knew that love and wisdom would always guide them. That night, as the stars appeared, Rapunzel's song carried across the kingdom. Her child joined, their voice stronger, filled with hope. Together, their harmony reminded all who listened, even in doubt, love endures and courage grows. With doubt behind them, Rapunzel's child began to embrace their role with new confidence. The kingdom noticed the change, a steadier voice, a clearer presence, a heart that carried both courage and compassion. Where once they hesitated, now they stepped forward with calm assurance, guided by the lessons of their parents and the wisdom of experience. Rapunzel watched with quiet joy. She saw her child speaking with villagers, listening with patience, offering solutions with kindness. Her songs, once lullabies, now became harmonies of encouragement, weaving strength into the air. The prince stood proudly, his counsel steady, his trust unwavering. Together they knew their child was blossoming into the leader the kingdom would one day need. The people felt the shift. Festivals carried new energy, markets thrived with fresh ideas, and disputes were resolved with fairness and care. They saw in the child not only promise, but presence, a leader already shaping the kingdom's path. Rapunzel's heart was full. Her journey had carried her from solitude to love, from sorrow to motherhood, and now to legacy. Her child's confidence was proof that resilience endures, that kindness blossoms, that hope is never lost. And each evening, as the stars appeared, Rapunzel sang. Her child joined, their voice strong, weaving harmony with hers. Together, their song carried across the kingdom, a reminder that leadership is born not from power alone, but from love, resilience, and the courage to grow. Rapunzel's child began to take their first steps toward true independence in leadership. The kingdom, long guided by Rapunzel and the prince, now felt the dawn of a new era. The child spoke with advisors, made decisions with confidence, and carried the weight of responsibility with a steady heart. Rapunzel watched with quiet serenity. Her journey had carried her from solitude to love, from sorrow to motherhood, and now to legacy. She saw her child standing tall, their voice clear, their spirit strong. Her songs became blessings, woven with gratitude, guiding them gently from afar. The prince stood proudly, offering counsel when asked, but allowing space for independence. He knew that true leadership must be lived, not sheltered. And so, he stepped back, trusting his child to walk their own path. The people felt the change. They saw in the child not only promise, but presence, a leader already shaping the kingdom's future. Festivals carried new hope, markets thrived with fresh ideas, and the land itself seemed to breathe with renewal. Rapunzel's heart was full. Her child's journey was proof that resilience endures, that kindness blossoms, that hope is never lost. The legacy she and the prince had built now lived in the next generation, shining brightly across the kingdom. And each evening, as the stars appeared, Rapunzel sang. Her child joined, their voice strong, weaving harmony with hers. Together, their song carried across the land, a reminder that love endures, wisdom grows, and every new era begins with courage and compassion. Rapunzel and the prince began to step gently into the background, their child now confident and steady, carried the rhythm of leadership with grace. The kingdom felt the shift, decisions guided by youthful wisdom, presence shaped by compassion, and a voice that spoke with clarity. Rapunzel watched with serenity. Her journey had carried her from solitude to love, from sorrow to motherhood, and now to the gentle passing of the crown. She no longer needed to guide every step. Her child spirit had grown strong, their heart filled with resilience. Her songs became blessings, soft and steady, woven into the air like gentle farewells. The prince stood proudly, his counsel offered only when asked. He knew that true leadership must be lived, not sheltered. And so, he allowed his child to walk forward, trusting in the strength they had nurtured together. The people welcomed the transition with joy. They saw in the child not only promise, but presence, a leader already shaping the kingdom's future. Festivals carried new hope, markets thrived with fresh ideas, and the land itself seemed to breathe with renewal. Rapunzel's heart was full. Her child's journey was proof that love endures, that kindness blossoms, that hope is never lost. The crown, once heavy upon her head, now rested lightly, ready to be passed with grace. And each evening, as the stars appeared, Rapunzel sang. Her child joined, their voice strong, weaving harmony with hers. Together, their song carried across the land, a reminder that every transition is not an ending, but a beginning, shaped by love and resilience. The day of renewal arrived. Rapunzel and the prince, with hearts full of peace, prepared to pass the crown. Their child, now strong and steady, stood before the people, ready to guide the kingdom into a new era. The ceremony was gentle, filled with reverence. Villagers gathered, elders offered blessings, children sang songs of hope. Rapunzel placed the crown upon her child's head, her hands trembling, not with fear, but with joy. The prince stood beside them, his voice calm, declaring the dawn of a new chapter. The people rejoiced. They saw in the new ruler not only promise, but presence, a leader shaped by kindness, resilience, and love. Festivals filled the land, lanterns lit the skies, and the kingdom breathed with renewal. Rapunzel stepped back, her role now softer, her presence a guiding light rather than a ruling hand. She sang, her voice carrying blessings across the land. The prince stood proudly, his counsel offered when needed, his heart steady with trust. Their child, now crowned, spoke with clarity. This kingdom will thrive not through fear, but through compassion. We will walk together, guided by love, strengthened by resilience, and illuminated by hope. And so the crown was passed, not as an ending, but as a beginning. Rapunzel's story, once of sorrow, now lived as legacy, carried forward into a new era, shining brightly across the kingdom. Each evening, as the stars appeared, Rapunzel still sang. Her child joined, their voice strong, weaving harmony with hers. Together, their song reminded all who listened. Every generation carries the light of those before, and love endures beyond every crown. Rapunzel and the prince embraced their quieter roles. No longer rulers at the forefront, they became guides, storytellers, and gentle lights in the background. Their child, now crowned, began to shape the kingdom with their own vision. Fresh, vibrant, filled with promise. Rapunzel found joy in storytelling. She walked among the villages, sharing tales of resilience, of kindness, of hope. Children gathered eagerly, listening to her voice, learning that even in sorrow, love endures. Her songs became blessings, woven into the rhythm of daily life, carrying peace across the land. The prince became a steady presence, He offered wisdom when asked, counsel when needed, but allowed space for independence. His pride was quiet, his trust unwavering, his heart filled with gratitude for the legacy unfolding before him. The new ruler guided with clarity. They listened to the people, embraced new ideas, and shaped the kingdom with compassion. Festivals carried fresh energy, markets thrived with innovation, and the land itself seemed to breathe with renewal. The people saw not only a leader, but a continuation of Rapunzel's golden spirit and the prince's steadfast courage. Rapunzel and the prince watched with serenity. Their journey had carried them from sorrow to love, from solitude to family, from rule to legacy. Now they stood as guides, their voices softer, their presence steady, their hearts full. And each evening as the stars appeared, Rapunzel sang. Her child joined, their voice strong, weaving harmony with hers. Together, their song carried across the kingdom, a reminder that every new vision is rooted in the love of those who came before. The new ruler, Rapunzel's child, soon faced challenges of their own vision. Change, though welcomed by many, stirred unease in others. Some villagers longed for tradition, while others embraced renewal. The kingdom stood at a crossroads, its people watching carefully, waiting to see how their young leader would guide them. Rapunzel's child listened with patience. They walked among the villages, hearing voices of hope and voices of worry. They saw that leadership was not only about decisions, but about understanding hearts. And so, they sought balance, weaving together the wisdom of the past with the promise of the future. Rapunzel became a storyteller in these times. Her voice carried tales of resilience, of forgiveness, of love that endured through sorrow. Children listened wide-eyed, elders nodded with knowing smiles, and the people remembered that every challenge could be met with kindness. The prince offered quiet counsel. He reminded his child that strength is not in forcing change, but in guiding it gently, so that all may walk together. The kingdom began to adjust. Tradition was honored, renewal embraced, and unity slowly returned. The people saw in their ruler not only vision, but compassion, a leader who carried forward Rapunzel's golden spirit and the prince's steadfast courage. And each evening as the stars appeared, Rapunzel sang. Her child joined, their voice steady, weaving harmony with hers. Together, their song carried across the land, a reminder that every challenge is a chance to grow, and that love and resilience are the truest guides of all. The kingdom entered a new era. Rapunzel and the prince, their hearts at peace, stepped fully into the background. Their child, now ruler, guided the land with clarity, compassion, and resilience. The people thrived, the villages flourished, and hope shone brightly across the horizon. Rapunzel found joy in quiet moments. She walked among the gardens, sang softly to the stars, and shared stories with children who gathered eagerly at her side. Her voice carried not as command, but as blessing, a gentle reminder that love endures through generations. The prince stood with serenity, his counsel offered only when asked, his pride steady and calm. Together, they watched their child lead, their legacy alive in every choice, every song, every smile. The new ruler shaped the kingdom with vision. Tradition was honored, renewal embraced, and unity strengthened. Festivals carried joy, markets thrived with promise, and the people felt secure beneath the guidance of a leader born of love. And each evening, as the stars appeared, Rapunzel sang. Her child joined, their voice strong, weaving harmony with hers. Together, Their song carried across the land, a melody of past and future, of sorrow transformed into hope, of love that never fades. Thus the story of Rapunzel came to rest, from solitude to freedom, from sorrow to love, from captivity to legacy. Her journey became a song that would never end, a song carried by her child, by the people, by the stars themselves. A song of kindness, resilience, and forgiveness, echoing softly through time.